Remember like ages ago when Axon told the Toa Nuva that they couldn't go with the Bionicle to get the Mask of Life because they had a bunch of weird shit to do? Yeah, we on that weird shit now. This shit is so top secret that they actually have to sneak back into Metru Nui and not let anybody know that they're there. Because if literally anybody else knew what they were doing, the Brotherhood might be able to figure it out and shit would be just completely turbo fucked if that happened. So the Toa sneak into the Great Temple. Scouring the Great Temple, they find a list. And, holy shit, it's cursed. The first item on the list, reawaken the Borok Queens. In order to defeat the Borok Queens, the Toa had to freeze them in Protodermis, very similarly to how the Toa Metru dealt with Makuta. And now they have to thaw them. The same monstrosities they fought so hard to defeat, they must now re-release on their old island home. And that's just item number 1. So the Borok Queens come out of their imprisonment like, "What's up, fuckers?" And, well, that's that. Goodbye, former island home. I can't even imagine what that must feel like. It's probably some grim mix of dread and disappointment. The next thing they have to do is find an item called the Staff of Artaka. It's a weapon with untold powers of healing and creation. And it's just sitting in the Metru Nui archives. Except it's not, because it's not fucking there anymore. Man, you know what we should do with one of the most powerful weapons ever? Put it in a museum. There's no way anybody would be bold enough to pull a reverse Britain. But also, like, you just had that sitting around in the archives? Like, what the fuck? But anyway, it's fucking gone. And you'll never guess which motherfucker has it. The Shadowed One. Yeah, the Dark Hunters stole the Staff of Artaka. Come get it, suka. Oh wow, a Staff of Artaka. That's worth 15 rebels! So now that the Toa know where the Staff of Artaka is, they simply have to walk into the Shadowed One's base on the island of Odina. But as you've probably guessed, one does not simply walk into Odina. So they have to stealth this bitch. Gali is quick to point out that most Toa, especially this Toa team, are not really built for stealth. They're noble warriors fighting where they can be seen. Shit like that. And yet, things go surprisingly well. They clobber a few Dark Hunters and make it to the center of the stronghold. Tahu suspects that a weapon this powerful would be close to the throne room because the Shadowed One wouldn't, just kind of lock it in the archives and forget about it, right? So they're all preparing to square off against the Shadowed One. But when they reach the center of the chamber, nobody's there. And then the walls quite literally start closing in. The Toa are trapped. And then they hear the voice of the Shadowed One. Hello! Shit. We are almost at 200 episodes. The Shadowed One has the captured Toa at his mercy, but he doesn't kill them. And he basically says, "I know what you're here for. I don't have it anymore. I sold it to the island of Zia for a supply of weapons." I mean, excuse me, what? This is one of the most powerful weapons in history, and you sold it for, like, I don't know, some fucking guns? This is a staff that embodies the spirit of creation itself, not fucking Shmi Skywalker, you stupid fuck. The Shadowed One says, "I will set you free on one condition. You must kill Rudaka for me." Y'all remember Rudaka, Mommy Dom of the Vizorak? She had originally been selling the Dark Hunters information on the Brotherhood of Makuta, but as the Shadowed One found out, much like Marlon Brando in the 60s, she'd been playing both sides. And now he wants her dead. Tahu's response is basically, "Yeah, sure." Gali's a little perplexed by this, but Tahu tells her, "Don't worry, I have a plan." And the first step of that plan is sending Liwa back to Metru Nui alone. It really do be like that, huh? With Liwa on his way back to Metru Nui, the remaining 5 Toa make their way to Rudaka's home island of Zia. And the island is, well, it's beyond fucked up. Apparently, not long ago, Botar just decided that he was going to teleport the Tatarak into the middle of the island. The Kanohi Dragon's there too. I'm assuming Botar put that there as well, but I'm not quite sure. Even the giant living mountain in the middle of the island has, like, chunks taken out of it and shit. Onua is sent to retrieve the staff from the underground vault that the Vortex are keeping in it. God damn it, this is the same thing with the archives. It's gonna get stolen, for fuck's sake. The other 4 Toa find and corner Rudaka. Tahu says to her, "Look, motherfucker, you can either let the dragon eat you, let the Brotherhood find you, or have the Dark Hunters kill you. Or you can be taken into our custody, and then maybe we can help you." And Rudaka's just like, "Fine, whatever." And then Tahu's like, "Oh wait, one last thing. Just gotta wait for Liwa to get back. Just give me a minute." Liwa returns to meet the other Toa, and as Tahu instructed, he's brought the 6 Rahaga. As a brief refresher, these are the little kobold dudes that used to be Toa that got mutated by Rudaka. Tahu basically puts the Rahaga in front of Rudaka and says, "Fix them." And reluctantly, she does. Which the Rahaga are all just, like, ecstatic about. And the best part, they're the ones that get to take Rudaka into custody. Bye, bitch! Then Onua shows back up. He does not have the staff. And he's taken a massive beating. Onua explains that while getting the staff, he was confronted by a gigantic motherfucker named Icarax. He claimed that now the Brotherhood of Makuta was his. And that, quote, "soon the realm of Karzani will be too." The worst part is, apparently, this motherfucker was wearing the Mask of Shadows. As you may be able to tell, none of this is good. Well, off to Karzani, I guess. My Borok horde grows larger by the day. The Toa Nuva arrive in the realm of Karzani and are like, oh my god, this place sucks. If you'll remember, this place is basically just hell. Karzani himself is nowhere to be found, and the Matoran are just kind of despondently wandering about. The Toa make use of some gentle persuasion tactics to evacuate all of these despondent Matoran from their hell realm. But all of a sudden, they are ambushed by the big motherfucker himself, Icarax. He's an absolutely stellar warrior and obliterates the Toa team. All except for Gali. Now she's assuming that if her team isn't already dead, they soon will be, and that she alone cannot take on this guy, unless she goes Nova. Now every kind of Toa when they go Nova is a little bit different. When a Toa of fire goes Nova, it's very much like an atomic bomb. With a Toa of water, it's an indescribably gigantic tsunami. It's happening again! I've done over 200 of these at this point. Gali unleashes her elemental energy in the form of a 1,000-foot tidal wave that completely flattens the entire realm of Karzani. In the last split second, she uses her mask power to bestow the power of water breathing upon herself and her comrades. Miraculously, they survive by the skin of their teeth. But Karzani is completely destroyed and Icarax is gone, and with him, the staff. It seems that they've failed. Everything might just be totally fucked now. But Tahu convinces the team that no, they can't give up now. Not after all this. They have to keep pushing. They have to keep finishing their tasks. This is what they were made to do. And the team agrees. Then Tahu spots something floating in the water. A very familiar golden how. Tahu salvages it before it can be lost, and the Toa move on. You should have left it to drift, man. This mask is fucking cursed, dude! It's that time of year again, folks. The Toa split up to go on various different missions. Tahu and Kopaka go to snuff out a bunch of volcanoes in the south. Gali's going back to the island of Madanui, and Pohatu and Onua are looking for something called the Heart of the Vizorak. The Heart of the Vizorak is a stone that, when placed firmly in the earth, will summon the entire Vizorak horde to its location. The goal is basically to summon a bunch of Vizorak to a very particular island on which there is a device that will cause a volcano to explode, erasing the entire Vizorak horde. It's like the ultimate can of Raid. Liwa just kind of disappears for a minute, nobody knows where the fuck he went. As we later find out, Liwa was instructed by, quote, a mysterious voice to go find a sundial on the island of Madanui and place it in the archives. I don't know. I don't know. Nobody else has any idea that he's doing this. No one bothered to ask. It just... I can't believe how much lore is still left. Gali's on the island of Madanui, and she sees the havoc that the Borok have wrought. The whole thing is just... It's rough. Like, imagine your childhood home got gobbled up by a bunch of man-sized termites. That's what's going on here. But one part of the island remains untouched. A cliffside with a telescope at the top. If you played the Madanui online game, you know exactly where this is. Gali has been tasked with plotting the trajectory of an astral body known as the Red Star, and she's going to use this particular telescope to do it. However, when she uses the telescope, she gets a very good look at the Red Star, and she notices that it's not, in fact, a star. She's not sure what it is, but she's sure that she sees something inside the star, and that something is alive. Gali's reaction is, holy fuck, I need to tell someone about this. However, she runs headlong into Botar. All he says is, you are needed. And then he grabs Gali and teleports them both to somewhere completely different. Fucking Botar, man. Don't hold your breath to talk about the Red Star thing. We'll get to that. Gali finds herself with the rest of her Toa friends in a strange spherical chamber. And then over some unseen PA system, a voice says, well done. We have brought you here to the island of Daxia to see the fruits of your labors. Then some big fellow walks in, carrying the staff of Artaka, which the Order just got a hold of off-screen. The big dude then places the staff in a little niche, and it starts glowing. Tahu is the first one to pop the question as to what the damn hell is going on here. As the disembodied voice explains, the staff is undoing all the damage that was done by Madanui's fall. And this is apparently only a fraction of its power. This is the thing that they just left in the archives, man! But as the voice explains, its only limitation is that it cannot reach into the core of the universe, which is apparently where the Toa are headed next. But first, we have to take a quick detour. Now are you going to save the world? A Matoran enters the chamber that the Toa are in, and he says, it's time to go. Kopaka, who's clearly getting very tired of the whole errand-running shtick, is just like, where the fuck are we going this time? And the Matoran answers, to the island of Artaka. So you remember how Karzani was basically Matoran hell? Well, Artaka isn't heaven, per se, but it's basically a legendary workers' paradise sort of situation. It's the first island ever created in the Matoran universe. It's where the first Toa were created. Our friends, the Toa Nuva, and a Toa that we haven't met yet named Helrix. We'll get to that. It's also where the Mask of Light was forged. It's a big fucking deal. The Matoran's like, Artaka might see ya, he might not, kinda just depends on the vibe, man. Pohatu's like, baller, when do we leave? And then they're suddenly just there. The Matoran just says, good luck, deuces, and then leaves. And now the adventure really begins. Alrighty then. Wait, have I already done this one? The Toa stand on the island in complete awe. It's absolutely beautiful. There's Matoran toiling about, working everywhere. The sun shines brightly. It's paradise. But then, all of a sudden, the weather makes like Maryland and changes in a snap. The indigenous Matoran run for shelter, but the Toa are just thrown around by this storm. Gali and Liwa try to defuse it, but it doesn't work. But the team presses on towards the massive fortress in the center of the island. As they arrive there, they are greeted by a booming voice that echoes throughout the land. The hell are y'all doing here, it asks. Tahu briefly explains what they've all been through to get here, and the voice is like, oh, alright. Kopaka's like, yo, big man, cut the bullshit. And Artaka's like, alright. And then the storm clears. I always get all giddy when a new year starts, it's great. As the storm clears, the snow and sleet that had accumulated washes away, revealing to the Toa new sets of beautiful armor. Artaka explains that this is perhaps his greatest creation yet. It's armor that once put on will adapt to whatever environment the Toa find themselves in. And he's like, you're gonna need this where you're going. Onua's like, come with us, we could use the help. And Artaka's just like, nah. Which is just like, I don't know, seems like a dick move to me. And then he's like, it's time to go. The Toa don't have time to protest as their vision starts to blur. And they are once again transported to someplace completely different. The Toa all find themselves flying and dropped right in the middle of an aerial battle. And I think you all know what comes next. I got Mox! Yeah, baby! For freedom we rise, motherfuckers! Welcome to 2008! I moved my desk. So when we left off, the Toa had been dropped into the middle of an aerial battle. But like, what was leading up to that? Also, where are they? They've already been told that they're gonna get dropped into the center of the universe, but where is that? Well, we find ourselves in a place called Cardanui. Cardanui is inhabited by these guys. Now, while you may assume that these are all Matoran of different elements, that's not actually true. These are all Avmatoran. Matoran of Light. Cardanui exists in a massive dome, just like Metronui. But basically, when the Great Cataclysm happened and that Voyanui Marinui chunk broke off of the southern continent, it made a hole in Cardanui's dome where water started pouring in from. Now, all the different villages in Cardanui are built on these massive fallen stalactites. It's actually pretty cool. But everything underneath there is being filled with this noxious water from the pit and being mutated. That's not the worst thing that's going on right now, though. So let's talk about Cardanui for a second. It's known as the Heart of the Universe. The name in Matoran actually means Great Heart. Now, for a lot of its existence, it's actually been mostly empty. It was populated until about 100,000 years ago, when the Great Spirit awakened for the first time. The Avmatoran left after this, and just spread out across the Matoran universe. However, about 40,000 years ago, the Order of Madanui caught on to the fact that the Brotherhood of Makuta might be, up to shit. And they figured that given that the Brotherhood of Makuta was an organization of shadow, the Matoran of Light would be some of the first people to be threatened by them. So the Order of Madanui taught the Avmatoran how to hide by changing their armor color from white and gold to green and such. And then erased everybody's fucking memories. How? I'm not sure. Anyway, these guys were hidden, just chilling, and then the Great Cataclysm happened. And they all started returning to Cardanui. You know, the builds suck, but I do really love the aesthetic of these little figures. So right after the Great Cataclysm about 1,000 years ago, the Avmatoran migrated back to Cardanui. Why? You're not gonna like the answer, so you're not gonna get it yet. But basically, they re-established their homes on the tops of these fallen stalactites. Because conveniently, you know, they have flat tops. Which just visually is so fucking beautiful. Like, the ads for this year don't get enough credit for just being fucking gorgeous. Like, you cannot tell me that is not some of the coolest shit you've ever seen. Like, fucking look at that! Anyway, so the Matoran were just in Cardanui, minding their own business, working, doing Avmatoran shit, when all of a sudden this weird shit starts falling out of the sky, and starts transforming the Avmatoran into things that really aren't Avmatoran. So things in the heart of the universe go from being mostly chill to very much not chill very fucking quickly. But where are these things coming from? You're not gonna like the answer to this one either. I sneezed so hard that my eyes hurt. This right here is known as a Tridax pod. When it falls from a great height, it shatters, dropping a whole bunch of these freaky little bastards. I don't know if you can see it, but he's got a little face and it's adorable. These are known as shadow leeches. They feed off of a creature's light, so an Avmatoran is a veritable smorgasbord. Those who are fed off of are reduced to shadowy, deranged versions of themselves, and usually end up looking something like this. But who's dropping these things? Well, these creepy mutant fucks are known as Makuta. Not as like Makuta the person, Makuta the species. So first giant plot twist of 2008, Makuta is actually a species. You've actually already met another member of this species, Icarax. Spooky Ghost Man's name is not actually Makuta, it's Pterodax. This is the first big twist of 2008 and it only gets weirder. Man, who would have thunk that the most evil mastermind in the entire universe was actually named Terry? So disregarding Icarax, who shows up eventually, there's about 7 Makuta in Cardanui right now. And they all have different claims to fame. Let's start with Mutron. Mutron is the guy who created the Shadow Leeches by mutating a bunch of Krata, the little worm dudes that pilot the Rakshi, in case you forgot. He's also the guy who created that giant sentient mountain that keeps eating people on the island of Zia. We'll get to that. Actually, you know what? There's a whole series of blog entries that Greg Farshty did known as the Mutron Chronicles, which is basically just Mutron writing his memoirs as far back as about 80,000 years. So we're gonna do something we've done way the fuck too often so far. We're gonna flash back in time. Let's go! We have to flash back, Morty. We have to go back in time, Morty! So I hadn't fully read the Mutron Chronicles until, like, literally 5 minutes ago, and oh my god, it's like some of the best written Bionicle stuff ever. I highly recommend reading it yourself if you can. The story begins about 80,000 years ago, when things were very, very different. Pterodax was not yet in charge. He was first lieutenant of the Brotherhood of Makuta under the leadership of a dude named Miserix. This is the closest thing to Miserix I could manage. Look him up, his build is fucking weird. Anyhow, this dude ran the Brotherhood of Makuta relatively straight-laced. Everything was mostly fine. And then the League of Six Kingdoms started making trouble. If you'll remember, they don't actually look like this yet, but whatever. Prydak basically told Miserix that the Brotherhood works for us now. You're gonna make us war beasts and shit. Miserix's response to Prydak is basically, eat shit and die. So there's, you know, a little bit of animosity going on, if you can tell. For those of you wondering, yes, I did just put a Vorok's head on the giant Rakshi build that I've had for a while. Prydak reminds Miserix that the Six Kingdoms have been put in charge at the will of the Great Spirit, and that the Six Kingdoms have a fuckload of military resources. And that if the Brotherhood of Makuta does not do what the League of Six Kingdoms want, they're gonna do things to them that will make the Eastern Front look like fucking Mardi Gras. At which point Miserix is like, fine, whatever. Of course Miserix has an ace up his sleeve. Takedox. We already know all about this treacherous, slimy piece of shit, so let's move on. Mutron was in charge of making a bunch of war beasts for Kalma. But Kalma was running into a problem. It was like, hey, why my birds and the bees keep dying? The truth is, Kalma treated Mutron like shit, so Mutron just kept giving him animals that would die within the first couple of days. And there wasn't really much Kalma could do about that. Such a baller move. Anyway, the Six Kingdoms fall, yada yada yada. And Mutron gets sent to Kalma's lair for cleanup duty. I am just plumb out of ideas for cold opens. So Mutron's in Kalma's fortress. He and another Makuta named Gorast are basically there to murder any more loyalists. But while he's there, he finds something very interesting. There were creatures named Blade Burrowers, which Mutron had invented and sent to Kalma. He had expected them to die within a couple of days, and many of them did. However, they also formed colonies together, and started digging this massive, incredibly intricate system of tunnels underground. Now, from what Mutron could tell, this didn't follow any pattern of islands that he was aware of, or any other tunnel system that he knew of. It was just weird, because it was clearly very intentional and very specific, and he just couldn't figure out what it was. He even kidnapped a Toa with the Mask of Translation to get that Toa to figure out why the Blade Burrowers were doing what they were doing. To no success! Now this shit drives Mutron up the fucking wall, but he'll have answers sooner than he thinks. Look, he's got a pet bird! After the Six Kingdoms fell, things got a little fucky. Because as horrible as their despotic rule was, once they were taken away, there was a power vacuum. A power vacuum in a universe that relies very heavily on certain hierarchies. So, like I said, shit got real fucky real fast. There was a civil war in Metro Nui, and we can talk about that at a whole other point. Miserix's shtick at this point was basically that the Brotherhood of Makuta had to step in and fill some of these shoes that had been left very unfilled. And part of that process was establishing whether certain entities could be a threat to the status quo. Mutron was sent to investigate one of these entities, a creature named Tren Krom. Tren Krom is basically Cthulhu. He's older than the entire Matoran universe, he's older than Mata Nui, he's supposedly older than the stars, and he's apparently immensely powerful. So you can imagine why something like that might present a threat to the status quo. Enter Mutron. Shit, did I get a sunburn? Mutron arrives on the island of Tren Krom, and it has some real bad energy. And he finds Tren Krom. And it's oh boy. It's just a big old plate of evil spaghetti. He has, like, eyes, but they're just these black voids staring out from this writhing mass of tentacles. And his voice is fucking horrible, apparently. Trent Crom just goes digging through Mutron's mind and interfacing with it, which just generally seems like a real bad fucking time. Then he very suddenly wakes up back on the beach. Trent Crom is gone, the cave they found him in is also gone. It might have all just been like a nightmare, but as Mutron says, he knows better. This happened. This was real. And more importantly, he now has some very important information. Information that makes Makuta Pterodax's plan to overthrow the Great Spirit very feasible. Mutron tells Pterodax about what he learned. And what did he learn? Well, you don't get to find that out yet. But I know, and it's great. Anyhow, Makuta Pterodax calls upon the Brotherhood for a convocation, which is just basically a summons for all the main members of the Brotherhood of Makuta to meet. Pterodax is already starting out with some brass balls, because usually no one is allowed to do this except for the leader, Miserix. Like, technically anybody's allowed to do it, but it's just like you don't do that. So he's already kicking things off with some real animosity. With the Brotherhood assembled, Terry reveals his plan, and the reception is mixed. A couple of Makuta are straight up on board. They're like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's go, rock on. Some are on the fence, and plenty raise a lot of objections. Pterodax listens to them patiently, but Mutron knows that he's just building his shit list for later, because shit's about to go down. The correct plural of beef jerky is beeves jerky. Sit with that for a minute. Perhaps unsurprisingly, one of the principal objectors to Pterodax's plan is Miserix. Miserix basically says, you're gonna lead the Brotherhood to destruction, and Pterodax is like, I'm going to lead it to supremacy. Miserix basically says, you're gonna end the universe because you're power hungry? You're a fucking prick. And Pterodax says, okay, boomer. With various degrees of reluctancy, more and more Makuta move to stand behind Pterodax, leaving Miserix to stand alone. Makuta claims leadership of the Brotherhood by will of the convocation. His first act as leader is to sentence Miserix to death. Miserix is carried off by two dudes named Krika and Spiria, supposedly to his death. But the thing is, his body is never found. So is he dead? We'll get to that. I'm leaving the League of Six Kingdoms in the pit for 80,000 years, or until something interesting happens. So after the overthrow, a couple of things end up happening. A Makuta named Chirox discovers that they've started to evolve into these creatures of antidermis. This is basically their full transition into spooky ghost men. Now, there are some benefits to this. It means the Makuta can leave their bodies and inhabit other armor, or mechanical beings, like the way that Pterodax did with Maxilos. What it also means, unfortunately, is that if their armor gets shattered, basically they're kind of fucked. Like, holding yourself together when you're just a giant cloud of gas is apparently a lot of work. Pterodax's solution to this? Thicker armor. He summons a bunch of Matoran known as the Ninra Ghosts to reinforce their armor with something called proto-steel, which is basically just very, 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 very hard steel. I'll do a video on the Ninra Ghosts at some point in the future, but there's a whole lot more shit going down that we still need to cover. Fick deine Mutter, du Hurensohn. One of the next important things to happen, the Mask of Light is created. And the Brotherhood is low-key shitting themselves. Because, like, a Toe of Light versus a whole bunch of Shadow, it's not going to end well for them. That's not a good thing. So naturally, they need to get their hands on it. The mask is located on Artaka. Now, as we already know, most people don't really know where Artaka is, ever. However, a guy named Makuta Kojol does. When the various Makuta were put in charge of overseeing different islands, Kojol was put in charge of overseeing Artaka. And for a while, he was pretty obedient in keeping it a closely guarded secret, until he wasn't anymore. Pterodax was very clear with Kojol. Make this a clandestine operation. No one should know that you were in or out. Kojol said, alright, bet, and did nothing of the sort. Instead, opting to charge in with an army of Exotoa and Rakshi. Much like Brett Kavanaugh's conception, this would prove to be a big fat mistake. You'll never guess how I got this crown. Kojol returns to Pterodax's home base on Destral and says, yeah, look at me, bitch, I got it. Which is great, except it's totally not. The first thing to happen is that the Rakshi that Kojol had brought with him on his raid are found dead, the Krata having rotted out of the suits, which is like a super graphic image. Ugh. Then the Exotoa just go missing. Nobody knows where they went, they're just gone. And last but not least, Kojol dies by way of an armor-eating virus that he contracts while trying to sell said virus to the Vortex. That's some poetic justice for you. Now, Mutron was the one who discovered the Rakshi, and he was the first one to have an inkling that something bad was probably going to happen to Kojol. But he thinks Kajol's an arrogant prick and hates his guts, so he didn't tell him anything. Oh, and in case you forgot, the Toa Haga, Makuta's personal bodyguards, nick the Mask of Light and go hide it somewhere. This went about as badly as it could have gone, and it's hilarious. So some more stellar news. Now that Kajol is dead, everybody has once again no idea where the fuck Artaka is. Anyway, now stuff starts happening that we've already heard about. The Battle of Metronui, the Vizirac, all that shit. Now, as Mutron points out, a lot of these things happened because of some subpar leadership choices on the part of Pterodax. And this is starting to piss off our old friend, the big motherfucker, Icarax. You'll notice that he has a different mask because canonically he doesn't have the Mask of Shadows yet. This is the mask he has now. It's the Mask of Scavenging, and it's totally not really relevant. I just figured I'd point it out. So Icarax decides he's just going to take the abandoned city of Metronui all on his own. And he would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling spooky ghost men. And it comes to blows. Now, Icarax is a much better fighter than Pterodax, and it actually looks like Icarax might win. The thing is, while he's beating the piss out of Pterodax, Pterodax is just biding his time. I'm just getting real excited to show you all the mocks that I've made. As Icarax is wailing on Pterodax, he starts to get a little winded. At which point, Pterodax exercises some of his limited mind control abilities, and hijacks Icarax's entire army of Manus crabs. Oh right, he brought an army of crabs with him, I totally forgot to mention that. And so Pterodax completely turns the tide of the battle with some crabs. But instead of killing Icarax, Pterodax lets him live. Because he's still of some use to the organization as a big motherfucker. Anyhow, the next 1,000 years go by pretty uneventfully. It's basically just Mutron and Chirox trying to outdo each other to see who can create just the most horrifying animal. Mad scientists, gotta love them. But then, through one of the studies of their Shadow Matoran slaves, the Makuta find a way into the heart of the universe, Cardanui. And as Mutron describes it, it's a big cave with a swamp in it. He's not really a big fan of the place, but sucks to suck. This is the build I used for Miserix, but with the correct head on top. Now it's about time we met some of the other Makuta. There are 3 other Makuta outside of Mutron that we're going to meet within the next couple of stories. Their names are Antraz, Chirox, and Vampra. Now there are 3 other Makuta we are also going to meet in the near future. Their names are Gorast, Biddle, and Krika. But let's stick to these 3 for now. I'm gonna look at their individual builds and backstories in a second. First, I'm going to explain to you, in part, what they're doing in Cardanui. They're taking the Matoran of Light and turning them into the Matoran of Shadow, with Shadow Leeches. They're just flying over the villages and bombing them like it's mid-century London. And it's pretty effective at first. The Av Matoran are forced to both hide from the Makuta and their former friends that are now trying to kill them. The last remaining village is holed up in this little bunker, not quite sure what to do. But then there's a sudden blinding flash of radiant light. For all of you that have lost track, this is Matoro having his Jesus moment. Now, the 3 Makuta are close enough to the blast to go completely fucking blind. Mutron was just in his lair experimenting. He's totally fine. But Antraz, Vampra, and Chirox are blind as bats now. So they need to have their Shadow Matoran ride them so that they could actually see where they're going. It was a weird marketing gimmick from 2008 where you could basically take the Matoran and kind of just attach them to the backs of the larger figures. It was a weird choice, but it was kind of fun. Anyway, let's get into the individual Makuta. It's mock time, bitches!